Hi everybody, welcome back to CMN 153, and this is for our class for Thursday, the 4th of August, where I wanted to move forward and have us talk about magazines. But you'll notice in the notes below, I have a brief article for you to read from the AP News about the consolidation of books. And if you've been listening to the news, then you've been listening to a trial that's going on that recently had the very famous author Stephen King testify about the consolidation of publishing houses and what that has done to the book industry from his perspective. So I thought that this would be just a very timely thing for you to read. Again, very short article from the Associated Press. As you know, I try to find things from the Associated Press whenever possible. And that was our last class, is that we were talking about newspapers. And there's a brief video that I wanted you to watch about newspapers. It came out in 2021 about some of the struggles that newspapers have experienced pre-COVID, but certainly during and since COVID. Assuming that we can even say since COVID at this particular point in time. I think we're still in the midst of it. So that's 13 minutes long, and it talks a little bit about some of the challenges of that the newspaper industry is experiencing. Now, magazines are different from newspapers because newspapers tend to be targeted towards more general audiences, while magazines are targeted on more specific demographic groups. Demographics being those observable characteristics that you can see amongst individuals. So it could be something based on, let's say, their gender or their ethnicity or their political affiliation. There are lots of different demographic groups. Basically, this is very similar to the early days of the internet, in that you think about that what made the internet so remarkable is that it was really able to appeal to lots of different demographic groups. So magazines also focused on visuals. And again, if you think about it, that's really one of the other ways that the internet really established itself as this new media vehicle, because it was so visually rich. The paper is of higher quality than newsprint, so it's supposed to be semi-permanent as opposed to disposable, which is what we see with a newspaper, but not quite as permanent as what you would see with something like a book. And they weren't usually daily. They could be weekly and they could be monthly. And I just wanted to briefly talk to you about magazines because there's an excellent documentary on YouTube about magazines that I wanted you to watch. But basically, magazines began in the 1700s in France. The word magazine means storehouse, and that's what magazines are, really storehouse for information, or sadly perhaps a storehouse for advertisements. They developed slowly in colonial America, and mostly they were targeted towards the educated and the wealthy, merchants and politicians. Initially, they were driven by text, and then eventually that transformed into visual images, which led to photojournalism, photos documenting life and historical events. In the mid-1900s, Reader's Digest was the most popular magazine in the United States. Reader's Digest was a condensed republication of some of the great works of literature. It had the highest U.S. and also the highest global circulation. In the 1980s, TV Guide, which was viewed as a magazine, had the highest circulation because that basically was the only way that individuals could get the television listings. And I mentioned this last class that Rupert Murdoch in the 1980s very cleverly purchased TV Guide so that he could include his new network, Fox, to compete with the three big networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, because he was in control of the television listings by owning TV Guide. Now, AARP is the highest U.S. circulated magazine because of demographics, more than anything else, the Association of Retired Persons. So our demographics are increasingly aging in the United States. Tabloids don't want to be claimed by either newspapers, though they are oftentimes printed on newsprint, so they're meant to be impermanent, but they also don't want to be claimed by the magazine industry, which is a step above, I suppose, in terms of printing quality, at least in terms of the paper that's used and the images that are used. Not necessarily content, but content is the reason why newspapers and magazines don't want to be associated with tabloids. Though I can say that the newspaper industry, much like the television industry in regards to news, has become much more tabloid-like, as we saw with the documentary Outfoxed. Demographic editions that are targeted to a specific demographic group. And again, the idea isn't that you're going to sell huge amounts, but that you can target particular groups, and targeting is so important with advertising, especially before the internet. And webzines is something else to consider, that we're exclusively online. But as I indicated, I have a wonderful a documentary for you to watch about magazines that came out in 2007, and it's rather lengthy, and it's in 3 parts on YouTube. So Inside Great Magazines 1, that's about 47 minutes. Inside Great Magazines 2, and that's another 47 minutes. And then finally Inside Great Magazines 3, and that's yet again 47 minutes. So I'm going to leave you to watch those 3 pieces, which I think will give you a good overview of the magazine industry. And our attendance question, which will be due on Saturday the 6th at 1 p.m., but certainly feel free to contact me if you'd like additional time. You are to identify and analyze an interesting magazine image that's shown in that documentary, Inside Great Magazines, either in part 1, part 2, or part 3, and indicate why you think it's so interesting. So I hope you're doing well. I'm doing well, and we will continue on next class talking about magazines and more. Take care. Bye-bye.